Did you know that the ancient Egyptians believed the soul couldn't reach the afterlife if their body wasn't intact? Hello and welcome to World History Encyclopedia. My name is Kelly and today's video is all about the history, importance and process of mummification in ancient Egypt. Don't forget, the easiest way to support us is by giving this video a thumbs up, subscribing to our channel and hitting that bell icon for notifications so you don't miss out on any new uploads. If you haven't already heard, World History Encyclopedia has teamed up with Andante Travels to bring you the Treasures of Ancient Greece guided tour. Join our expert tour guide, Dr. Rita Roussos, as she takes you on a journey through classical Athens to Delphi, across the Gulf of Corinth, and into the Peloponnesian Hills, where the hero Hercules began his 12 labors, and King Agamemnon set out to rescue Helen and capture Troy. Make sure to visit worldhistory.travel or hit the link in the description below to learn all about this amazing trip, and we hope to see you there. Mummification of the deceased is a practice that began in ancient Egypt as early as 3500 BCE that not only prevented the body from decay and decomposition, but was done to ensure the deceased's successful passage to the afterlife, because a soul couldn't reach the afterlife if their body wasn't intact. Mummification is the process involved in embalming and preserving the body after death in order for the soul to continue its eternal journey, because a person's immortal soul, name and identity were linked to their physical form. The jackal-headed god Anubis was not only a protector of the dead, but was the god of the afterlife and mummification, the inventor of mummification, and presided over mummification rituals and funerals. Prior to Osiris becoming the lord of the underworld, Anubis's role was as the lord of the dead. But after the death and rebirth of Osiris, Anubis became Osiris's right-hand man, who guarded Osiris's body after death, oversaw his mummification, and assisted Osiris in the judgment of souls. Both of these deities were highly respected and associated with death, mummification, and the afterlife, with Osiris often depicted as a mummified ruler with either black or green skin that symbolizes both death and resurrection. Mummification developed from the ancient Egyptians' religious beliefs. Burials from the pre-dynastic period of Egypt, dating to circa 5000 BCE, were shallow, rectangular or oval graves that contained a body that wasn't mummified, some grave goods and food offerings. So, although the deceased wasn't mummified, this early in the history of Egypt, the Egyptian people already believed in some sort of afterlife, as evidenced by grave goods. Through time, the burials evolved into more elaborate affairs, and by the early dynastic period between circa 3150 and circa 2613 BCE, cemeteries had become more common, and the use of mastabas, flat-roofed rectangular structures, had become more popular than the early simple graves. These burials weren't just for a person's final resting place, but was designed as eternal homes for the body, which was understood as the mortal vessel for one's eternal soul. The soul had grown used to the body, however, and identified with it, and so it had to be reassured after death that the body was still intact and close at hand. Inscriptions of spells in the pyramid texts, the coffin texts, and the Book of the Dead, and tombs painted with scenes of daily life not only prepared the soul for what to expect in the afterlife, but to remind the soul of what was happening after the body had died and assure the soul the body was nearby. Death wasn't an end, but a transition from one state to another, leaving the body behind. But this transition could not proceed if the soul was traumatized by the loss of the body, and so the body had to be very carefully prepared in order for the soul to recognize it upon reawakening in the tomb. The Egyptians had the belief that the soul consisted of 9 separate parts. The Khat, which was the physical body, the Ka, which was one's double form or astral self, the Ba, which was a human-headed bird aspect, which could speed between earth and the heavens, or more specifically, between the afterlife and one's body. The Shuyet, which was the shadow self. The Ak, which was the immortal, transformed self after death. The Sahu, which was an aspect of the Ark. the Sechem, which was another aspect of the Ark, the Ab, which was the heart, the source of good and evil and the holder of one's character, and finally the Ren, which was a person's secret name. So for the Ka and the Ba to recognize themselves after death and to properly function, the Khat had to exist. After death, the different aspects of the soul would be confused after they were released and needed to center themselves by the familiar form of the body. According to Herodotus, there were 3 types of embalming offered: the best and most expensive kind, an inferior and cheaper process, and then the cheapest of the 3. The family of the deceased would have to choose which one for the deceased, and their choice could affect both themselves and the deceased, since if they could afford the more expensive one, but they chose one of the inferior embalming options, then they run the risk of a haunting, since the dead person would know that they had been given a cheaper service than they deserved. The deceased could still hear and see, as the ancient Egyptians believed that death wasn't the end of consciousness. So both burial practice and mortuary rituals were taken incredibly seriously, since the dead were understood to be present. People still seem to choose the service they could most easily afford though, and the type of embalming they chose would then determine the kind of coffin available, the funerary rites, and the treatment of the body. For mummification, the key ingredient was natron, known as a divine salt. Natron is a combination of sodium chloride, sodium sulfate, sodium carbonate, and sodium bicarbonate, which was the best at defatting and removing the moisture from the body, although common salt was also used. In the most expensive embalming method, the brain was removed by a hook through the nostrils, and any brain matter left would be flushed out with drugs. The contents of the abdomen, including all of the organs, were then removed through an incision in the left side, and the empty cavity would be washed and then cleaned, then filled with aromatic herbs and substances, then sewed back up. After which, the body would be covered in natron for at least 40 days, and absolutely no longer than 70 days. Then the body was washed, wrapped in linen strips, sometimes with magical amulets and charms, and given back to the family in a human-shaped coffin. In the mid-range embalming process, the intestines aren't removed, but the body is filled with cedar oil, then placed in the natron, and then at the end of the salt process, the oil was drained from the body. At this point, all that is left is skin and bones, which are returned to the family as is. And the third and cheapest option was that the intestines were washed out of the body and then kept in natron for 70 days, according to Herodotus. The process of mummification was followed with animals as well as humans, and Egyptians regularly had their pet cats, dogs, birds, baboons, fish, and gazelles mummified. Why are the internal organs removed? Well, it's to help preserve the corpse, but it was believed the deceased would still need the organs, so they were placed in canopic jars and sealed in the tomb. Only the heart was left in the body, as it was thought to contain the Ab aspect of the soul, which contained the person's identity and character, although there are examples of mummies where the heart has been removed. In the grave or tomb of the deceased, along with the body and canopic jars, would also be placed grave goods, including shabti dolls, which would perform a specific task for you in the afterlife, so your soul could relax instead of having to work. The more wealth you had, the more shabti dolls you could afford, and the less your soul had to work in the afterlife. The deceased would also be buried with other objects deemed necessary in the afterlife, like jewelry, beer, combs, clothing, bread, weapons, and even their pets. It was believed that everything buried with the deceased would then be available to them in the afterlife for the soul to make use of. Before the tomb was sealed, the opening of the mouth ceremony was performed, which was a rite in which the priest would invoke Isis and Nephthys, the goddesses who brought Osiris back to life after he was chopped up by his brother Set, to awaken the soul. The priest would touch the mummy in various spots with different objects, like a chisel and a knife, and in doing so, he restored the use of the mouth, eyes, ears, and nose to the deceased. Then the mummy would be enclosed in either a coffin or a sarcophagus and left in the grave or tomb with their grave goods, and the funeral service would come to an end with a party honouring the deceased, while the soul of the departed would move on to eternal life. If you had the option, would you want to be mummified after you die? Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on our new videos every Tuesday and Friday. This video was brought to you by World History Encyclopedia. For more great articles and interactive content, head to our website via the link below. World History Encyclopedia is a non-profit organisation, and you can find us on Patreon, a brilliant site where you can support our work and receive exclusive benefits in return. Your support helps us create videos twice a week, so make sure to check it out via the pop-up in the top corner of the screen or via the Patreon link down below. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you soon with another video.